My name's Nigel Kershaw. I'm chairman of the Big Issue, and I'm the chief executive of Big Issue Invest, which is the Big Issue's investment arm. And I'm also a social enterprise ambassador and sit on the board of the Social Enterprise Coalition. It was about when the Big Issue was a year old, and I'd seen it being sold, and I'd read in a magazine that John wanted to start up a printing plant, printing the Big Issue, and I was going around the world setting up printing plants, and I wrote to him and said, I really like what you're doing. When I'm in this country, I'm not doing an awful lot. Can we meet up? We met up, and it got on really well. Then I went globe-trotting and did some work on a voluntary basis for the Big Issue. And then I was in Korea for about 2.5 months, setting up this football field of a press. And I came back and I decided I had enough. So I think that was on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and I saw John on a Saturday for breakfast and said, I'm going to do something else. And he said, well, why didn't you join us? And so that's how it happened. I joined the Big Issue. When the Big Issue started, Gordon Roddick had seen the model in New York and came back to the UK and thought, like a good venture capitalist, but what we're calling now a social venture capitalist, said, who can found this for me? So he said, I know, my old mate John Bird. So he got John to found it, and the body shop put in some money, and so John founded and grew the Big Issue. So it's that replication, because at that stage, if John had gone into a bank and said, look, in 17 years' time, I'm going to have a magazine that's going to sell 146,000 copies a week in the UK. It's going to be replicated over 68 different countries. And by the way, it's going to be sold by homeless people. He wouldn't have got past the commissar at the front door. And so what we were trying to do is recreate the opportunity for social enterprise and social businesses. And so that's how we came to have Big Issue Invest. And really in 2001, around 2001, I'd been working in America, John had been working in America, and we got very exposed to the social venture capital and the social investment scene in the States. And John rang me up and said, should we start a social bank? And I said yes, and off we went. Not a bloody idea how to run a social bank. We got a whole load of people around us who knew. One who regrettably died last week, a guy called John Norton, who was my Molan's husband, who had been a merchant banker, and he was very much involved in setting up what is now Big Issue Invest. Yes, we've launched the Social Enterprise Investment Fund, and it is an extraordinary fund, I think, and the first type in this country. It's almost an embryonic social investment bank, and we've set up a limited partnership, and we can take in charitable donation, we can take in mission-related investment from foundations, we can take private individual investment and institutional investment. And we're going to invest in social enterprises, and we can do that through loans, through asset-backed loans, through cash flow loans, through mezzanine products and equity. And 30% of those will be early-stage businesses. So really what we're saying is, if you want to invest in social business, come to us, and we'll take all types of investment. And if you're a social enterprise, we will invest in the best way we think for you. And that might even mean, which we're talking about, is acquiring private businesses and backing them into social enterprises. So we're completely open about what we're going to do. And for the investors, we're saying we're going to give you both a financial and a social return. And so we're saying we're not just a maximisation of profit, we're not about charity, we're actually about giving a blended return that delivers both. What's been interesting about social enterprise is, because there are no exits in traditional capital exits, is that we've had to look at what they're calling real business. We've had to look at the cash flow and what those businesses are generating, as opposed to capital exits. Now, with what's going on in the economy, we're seeing that businesses are starting to reflect what cash they produce and what their profitability, rather than companies going out and buying for market share. So now we have the real possibility of setting up joint ventures. and buying private companies and backing them into social enterprises, or setting up joint ventures with social enterprises and financiers and getting share issues such as Cafe Direct and so on. So it's very interesting that we're taking the equity route, and I think that's actually a maturing of the social enterprise sector, because we don't see that kind of distinction. There's a guy we're talking to now, and I was just on the phone to people who might be helping him, and it's a husband and wife team who are running an enterprise called Health Kicks, and it's around men's health, and men's health is probably a very neglected area, and this husband and wife team from their back bedroom, who are passionate health workers themselves, who are passionate about health, have set up this social enterprise where they're getting football clubs to deliver men's health in the clubs. And from this second bedroom, they're going to be launching on Match of the Day on Saturday. They've got the Premier League interested, the league interested, the rugby league is now interested, the NFL is interested, and so suddenly from this back bedroom of this kind of 10 months of absolute passion, they are sitting on something that could have enormous effect on people, on men's health lives. And so you see little things like that, and that's really extraordinary. I think the government has to put its money where its mouth is in a different sort of way. So if, for example, you donate to charity, you get a 28% gift aid. You get tax relief on 28%. If you invest in early stage companies that qualify, you can get 30% and 40% EIS and VCT, capital and income tax relief. But if you invest or take risk in a social enterprise, you get neither. And so social enterprise, which I believe is growing an alternative form of business, actually what we really want is a level playing field so we can attract private risk capital into the sector in order to grow social business. Wherever you look, you can see that the business has that power. And you can look at the incredible examples, and obviously we've talked about the Body Shop. I think the Body Shop changed the nature of business in this country. When Anita's lorries were going down the road with big things about domestic violence, nobody thought that was had any discrepancy against people selling foot lotion. It actually was part of the kind of social fabric of that company. And I think we're seeing more and more and more is that business actually thinks it's part of the social fabric and stands alone. If you look at the big issue itself, I mean, 146,000 copies a week, and that's a social business that's absolutely simple, changes lives, creates profit, and then we mug ourselves on the way to the bank and give it to our foundation. So, there is ways of doing business that can create and change people's lives.